The Poetic Gospel. Imagine this. You're born into a new world as a blank canvas with infinite possibilities. An infant, void of knowledge and equipped with only basic instincts for survival. Thank God for parents and elders. One of the first things that you're taught and retaught is to believe and obey your parents and elders without question. And at this point, it makes sense, since you wouldn't even have survived thus far without their care. Then you're taught other things, given rules and told stories to help you understand life and death. But soon you discover that some of these teachings and stories turn out to be false, like Santa Claus. The fact is, you were trained how to think and act in every situation by your elders, institutions, religions, and schools that you happen to live closest to. The elders' teachings were taught to them by their elders, and their elders were taught the traditions by their elders, and so on. The teachings are passed down in order to raise you to a higher understanding. But as you grow older and become an elder in your own right, you start to sense that the world you're in is much stranger than you once thought. And fear and doubt become you as you begin to feel unprepared despite all the many teachings. In fact, you're starting to slowly recognize that the solutions aren't solving the problems at all. Furthermore, the people that you would normally seek for advice seem to be dealing with similar problems, to no avail. The ancient message and methods, lost in translation, turned to wreckage. Pause. Now at this very moment, you're probably realizing that this may not be your everyday audiobook. So before we set out to save two birds from the dude with the one stone, and before we attempt to enlighten Goliath before David's forced to cast his deadly stone, let's first agree to set aside all the stones just for a moment and begin by establishing a solid foundation for us to build upon. You'd be interested to know that I set the bar remarkably high for this unique creation, and I plan to exceed even the highest of expectations. My vision for the Poetic Gospel is that it be used as a catalyst to realization and a spark plug to thought-provoking conversations. I chose the word gospel because of its spiritual and religious connotations, but not to imply some new dogmatic stagnation, but to tell a beautiful story, the story, followed by real-life revelations. Now I think we left off right before liftoff, still lost and wondering and worrying, still having questions that answers aren't answering. So I'm wondering, how many of us even think enough to seek alternative sources for these obviously missing answers? Only to find out that gaining knowledge don't always equate to gaining knowing. Now let's dissect this slowly before I share my testimony. I hope you've already begun to relate to this story, because in this is the gospel of all of his story. See, I came to realize, as you soon will, that seeing the bigger gospel made my smaller one crystal clear. And I promise that if you'd loan me your heart and both of your ears, by the time that I finish, you'll be damn near about to cheer. So the question is, what is it about common sense that makes it so uncommon? And why is humanity so divided when we have so much more in common? It's the feminists against the male chauvinists, the lights versus the darks, Democrats versus Republicans, Bloods versus Crips, science versus religion, this religion versus that religion. It's against logic that the human body is so torn apart. And ironic that the species given dominion over the animal kingdom is the one destroying the environment. Let us awake from sleep and repent, and take this sad song off repeat and commence in becoming who we all, in our hearts, wanted to be. Open your eyes and you'll see. Now let's go back to the beginning of the story and see what our problem is and why history repeats. Didn't we first learn to obey and believe without question? Well, tell me this. Did our schools, jobs, and religions teach us to think or be sheep? Now, I don't know if you're yet ready to use your own wisdom, but what truly is the difference between Muslim and Christians? Both believe what they believe because it was their family's tradition, and both value faith over knowledge and wisdom. Both claim love as their virtue, but both of their histories are of killing. I know I'm not the only one to think something's missing. So I started buying up books when I was tired of that feeling. Studied symbolism, occult means hidden. Studied both Indians, the Asians, and ancient Egyptians. Now I could mention all the plagiarism, astrotheology, geopolitics, and the similarities of the faith-based belief to the brainwashing systems. But I'm not here to tell you what to think. That's not part of my mission. I just want to tell my simple story and hope that somebody listens. My name is Jermaine. It's funny how different my mom and dad are. One's white and the other's black. One is highly religious and the other is highly rebellious. They've been separated since my birth. I was always closest to my grandmother, even though she was a pretty controversial individual, but an individual nonetheless. She passed away recently, but she lived a full life and probably needed some rest. But I won't bore you with my childhood. We'll start from the point that I became alive.